Welcome to Thalira Tales, where stories bloom in silence, carrying emotion, mystery, and hidden truth. Step in and let the tale unfold.
Natalie dragged her feet up the paved walkway toward her front door. The exhaustion of a grueling day at her corporate job hung heavy on her shoulders. This modern, minimalist house in a quiet, upscale suburb was the only place she could truly unwind. She had bought this home with her own hard-earned money long before she married Ian. To her, this house was her little sanctuary, her safest and most peaceful refuge. But her hope of simply collapsing onto her plush mattress was shattered the moment she turned the deadbolt and pushed the front door open. The foyer, usually pristine and smelling of lavender, looked like a disaster zone. Massive suitcases, haphazardly taped cardboard boxes, and duffel bags were scattered across her hardwood floors. Natalie froze in the doorway, blinking several times to process the bizarre sight. She carefully stepped inside, navigating around a suitcase blocking the hallway. The blaring sound of a sports game echoed from the living room. There, her husband, Ian, was lounging on the sectional sofa, happily munching on a bag of chips. Ian didn't even turn his head when Natalie walked in. His eyes remained glued to the flat-screen TV. The man, who had been unemployed for months, looked like he was having the time of his life, a stark contrast to Natalie, who was exhausted from being the sole breadwinner. Natalie set her designer work tote on the kitchen island and approached her husband, her heart pounding as she tried to suppress her rising anger. "Ian, what is all this? Whose luggage is piled up in the foyer?" Natalie asked, fighting to keep her voice level so she wouldn't yell. Ian lazily turned his head. He chewed loudly before answering with a completely innocent expression. "Oh, that's my mom's stuff. Riley and Rick's too. They're going to be living with us from now on." Natalie's heart stopped for a second. She stared at her husband in absolute disbelief. "Living here? You have to be joking, Ian. You never discussed this with me. This is my house. You should have at least asked for my permission before moving your entire family in permanently." Ian stood up from the sofa, his expression hardening. He glared at her, trying to assert his authority as the husband. "Why do I need your permission? I'm your husband. I'm the man of the house, and it's my duty to take care of my family. My mom and my siblings are staying here. As my wife, your job is to support us and cover their living expenses. Got it?" Natalie gasped at the sheer audacity coming from the mouth of the man who had once promised to protect and cherish her. Cover their expenses? Ian, are you listening to yourself? You haven't worked in months. I've been carrying the weight of our entire lives. My salary barely covers our groceries, the mortgage, and the utilities. Now you're telling me to support 3 more grown adults? Before Ian could snap back, the guest room door swung open. Ian's mother, Nancy, casually strolled out wearing a silk robe that Natalie didn't recognize. Right behind her trailed Riley and Rick, Ian's younger siblings, both deeply engrossed in their iPhones. Nancy's face dripped with arrogance as she looked at Natalie standing frozen in the living room. "What is all this yelling about?" "I was just trying to take a nap," Nancy said, fluffing her hair. She looked Natalie up and down with utter disdain. "You just got home from work, Natalie? Instead of heading straight to the kitchen to make dinner for your mother-in-law and your new housemates, you're picking a fight with your husband? Is this how you welcome your family?" Natalie clenched her fists so hard her knuckles turned white. She took a deep breath to keep her tears from spilling over. "Nancy, I'm sorry, but Ian never told me that you and the kids were moving in. Why would he need to report to you? Ian is my son. A son's wealth belongs to his mother. Therefore, this house is my house too. You're just the wife. Your job is to serve us," Nancy retorted sharply, speaking as if it were a universal law that couldn't be challenged. Riley, Ian's famously spoiled younger sister, chimed in without looking up from her screen. "Besides, this house is huge, and the guest room is okay, but the mattress is way too firm. You need to buy us a new memory foam mattress tomorrow, Natalie. My back is killing me." "Yeah, and you need to upgrade the Wi-Fi package," added Rick, Ian's lazy 20-something brother. "I was trying to play Call of Duty earlier, and the lag was insane. It's super annoying." Natalie's head pounded at these ridiculous, entitled demands. She looked at Ian, desperately hoping her husband would defend her or at least scold his family. But Ian just stood there in silence, even nodding in agreement with his mother and siblings. A profound, sickening disappointment gnawed at Natalie's heart. She realized that the marriage she had built with pure intentions had become a trap. Her husband was nothing more than a coward, hiding behind twisted views of family duty to leech off his wife's hard work. Without saying another word, Natalie turned on her heel and marched straight to the master bedroom. She slammed the door and locked it. The tears she had been holding back finally broke free. She slid down the back of the door, crying over how drastically her life had changed in a single day. The home that was supposed to be her sanctuary had been hijacked by a group of ruthless freeloaders. After crying for a while, Natalie tried to compose herself. She wiped her eyes and walked into the master bathroom to wash her face. She needed to clear her head to figure out how to deal with this insanity. As she stepped into the bathroom, her eyes fell on the glass shelf above the vanity, where she kept her expensive skincare. She froze. Her eyes went wide. The elegant glass dropper bottles containing serums that cost hundreds of dollars, things she saved up for months to buy, looked different. The liquid inside was cloudy. Her hands trembling, Natalie picked up her favorite night serum. The bottle felt lighter. She unscrewed the cap and smelled it. The delicate, floral scent was gone. Instead, it reeked of cheap, harsh, citrus dish soap. Natalie frantically checked the rest of the bottles, her expensive night creams, her toners, her sensitive skin face wash. All of them had been dumped out. The bottles were refilled with a mix of water and dish detergent. Her heart shattered seeing her prized possessions destroyed so callously. Right at that moment, muffled through the walls, she heard Riley's shrill, mocking laughter coming from the hallway. Natalie gripped the glass bottle so tightly she thought it might shatter. Her tear-filled eyes hardened, flashing with a fiery, unquenchable rage. She realized this wasn't just a family visit that had overstayed its welcome. This was a calculated invasion. They hadn't come just to stay. They had come to dominate and slowly break her. That night, standing alone in her bathroom, Natalie swore to herself that she would not let these parasites steal her life. The following days turned into a living hell inside her own home. Before the first week was even over, Ian's family had completely taken over. Acting like American royalty, Natalie's usually peaceful morning routine was now hijacked by shouted demands from every corner of the house. She had to wake up 2 hours earlier just to cook a massive breakfast, because Nancy flat out refused to eat chemical-filled frozen food or cereal. Yet, every time Natalie set a plate on the table, her mother-in-law found a reason to complain. One evening, Natalie served a beautiful, homemade herb-roasted chicken with garlic mashed potatoes and roasted asparagus. A recipe her friends always begged her to make. She wiped the sweat from her forehead, glancing at the clock, knowing she needed to review a presentation for work. But just as she turned to leave the kitchen, the loud clanking of a fork against a porcelain plate stopped her. "What kind of slop is this, Natalie?" Nancy's shrill voice pierced the room. Natalie turned around, holding on to her patience. "It's herb-roasted chicken. It's Ian's favorite. Is something wrong, Nancy?" Nancy pinched a piece of chicken breast between her manicured fingers and dropped it back onto the plate in disgust. "This chicken is dry as cardboard. Do you want my teeth to fall out? And these potatoes? They taste like paste. Can't you cook a decent meal for your husband's family? At least make a prime rib or a lobster tail. Our palates aren't used to eating cheap garbage like this." Natalie took a deep breath. "Nancy, the price of beef and seafood has skyrocketed. The grocery budget I have has to feed 5 adults until the end of the month. Chicken is the most reasonable option right now." Hearing her response, Ian slammed his fist on the dining table. "Don't you dare talk back to my mother, Natalie. If she wants prime rib, you buy prime rib. Stop being such a cheapskate. Your money is my money. Tomorrow, you will cook a meal that is actually fit for my family." "But Ian, my savings account is getting drained," Natalie said, her voice shaking with suppressed emotion. "Just put it on your credit cards. Max them out if you have to," Ian demanded with a fierce glare. "What's the point of having plastic if you aren't going to use it to keep my family happy? I don't care how you do it. Just get it done." Beyond the extravagant grocery demands, Ian's siblings were actively draining her patience and her wallet. Riley, who had just graduated and refused to look for a job, constantly whined about needing designer clothes she saw on Instagram. She would shove her phone in Natalie's face, demanding she buy her $400 dresses. Meanwhile, Rick spent 24/7 glued to his gaming monitor in the living room, screaming into his headset, eating all the snacks, and pitching a fit anytime the internet buffered. The utility and internet bills had doubled, and the entire financial burden landed squarely on Natalie's shoulders. The breaking point happened on the first weekend. Natalie was folding laundry in the living room when Nancy approached her, arms crossed, her face set in a demanding scowl. "Natalie, it's the beginning of the month. Where's my allowance?" A good son never holds back money from his mother. As his wife, you should have already handed me an envelope of cash without me having to ask, Nancy stated bluntly. Natalie stopped folding. She looked at her mother-in-law with sheer exhaustion. "An allowance? Nancy, I am paying for all the groceries, the electricity, the water, and the internet. I even bought the shampoo and body wash you and your kids are using. My paycheck is gone. I don't have extra cash to just hand out to you." Nancy's face turned beet red. "Are you trying to control my son's finances?" "Ian, get in here! Look at how your wife is treating me," she shrieked. Ian rushed out of the bedroom. "What's going on, Mom? Why are you yelling? Your wife is a stingy, selfish woman. She refuses to give your own mother spending money. You chose the wrong woman, Ian. A girl like this doesn't belong in our family," Nancy instigated, pointing a finger right in Natalie's face. Ian looked at Natalie with pure fury. He stepped toward her, his fists clenched. "Just give her what she wants, Natalie. Give her the cash right now. If you ever disrespect my mother or make her upset again, I will divorce you on the spot," he threatened, his voice booming. Natalie looked deep into her husband's eyes. She didn't see love, affection, or even an ounce of respect. All she saw was the greed and ego of a man desperate to feel powerful. To avoid a larger physical confrontation and to buy herself some time, Natalie relented. She took the last $200 in cash from her wallet and handed it to Nancy. The older woman snatched the bills with a victorious smirk and marched back to her room. That night, when the house was finally quiet, Natalie sat alone at her home office desk. She logged into her banking app and looked at her expenses for the past week. Her chest tightened. Her savings were bleeding out like water through a sieve. If this continued, she wouldn't just be broke. She'd be drowning in credit card debt. Natalie realized she couldn't fight them openly right now. She was outnumbered, and Ian was a master gaslighter. She needed evidence. She needed to know exactly what was happening in her house while she was working long hours at the office. Her brain went into overdrive, formulating a plan to gather evidence against these leeches. The next day, during her lunch break at the office, Natalie discreetly did some research on her phone. She found a highly rated, discreet, private security technician in the area. Once she had the right contact, she set up a flawless plan. She handed Ian a couple $100 and told him to take his mom and siblings to the luxury outdoor mall to buy some new clothes, claiming it was a peace offering so they would be happy. Greedy as always, Ian immediately agreed and packed everyone into the car. The moment the house was empty, the technician Natalie hired arrived. Working quickly and efficiently, he installed several state-of-the-art hidden micro cameras in strategic locations. One was wired into a smoke detector in the living room ceiling. Another was hidden inside the wall clock in the kitchen and dining area. A final camera was placed in the hallway, offering a clear view of the master bedroom and the front door. Once the devices were secured and synced directly to a secure app on Natalie's phone, she locked the house back up and paid the technician handsomely for his discretion. That evening, when Ian's family returned laden with shopping bags bought with her money, Natalie greeted them with a perfectly controlled, sweet smile. She served them iced tea and sat quietly as Riley and Nancy bragged about their purchases. Sitting in the corner of the room, Natalie's eyes sharply scanned her house, which was now equipped with secret eyes. They had nowhere left to hide. The real game had just begun. She would let these parasites think they had won, let them stay on their high horse, until the perfect moment to rip them out by the roots. She was the rightful owner of this castle, and she was going to make sure justice was served. The morning sun had barely crested the horizon, casting a warm glow through the kitchen blinds. Natalie had been up since before dawn, bustling around her kitchen. She had intentionally woken up early to prepare a special breakfast. Her mind was still spinning with questions about her in-laws' behavior, but she wanted to see if killing them with kindness would yield any change, or if it would just invite more abuse. She chopped vegetables, seared high-quality stew meat, and prepared a rich, slow-cooked beef stew that smelled absolutely heavenly. One by one, the parasitic family members emerged from their rooms. The savory aroma wafting from the kitchen had clearly woken them up earlier than usual. Nancy walked toward the dining table, her steps unusually light. Instead of her usual scowl and immediate complaints, the older woman plastered a wide smile on her face. It looked incredibly forced and didn't reach her eyes. She sat at the table and looked at the large ceramic bowl of steaming beef stew Natalie had just set down. Wow, my daughter-in-law's cooking smells amazing today. Ian is so lucky to have a wife like you, Nancy praised, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. She reached for a ladle and began scooping the rich broth into her bowl. Natalie, who was setting down the silverware, paused for a second. Something felt incredibly off about this sudden, drastic change in attitude. "Thank you, Nancy. I'm going to head to work now," she replied curtly, masking her suspicion with a flat expression. Ian, fresh out of the shower, joined them at the table. He lightly patted Natalie on the shoulder, a gesture of affection he hadn't shown in months. The unemployed man smiled sweetly at his wife, praising how hard she worked for the family. Even Riley and Rick, who normally complained about everything under the sun, sat quietly and ate without a single negative remark. They complimented how tender the beef was. All this sweet talking and praise made the hairs on the back of Natalie's neck stand up. She knew their true nature. The masks they were wearing this morning were too thick and too perfect. It was as if they were hiding a massive secret right behind her back. Choosing not to engage, Natalie grabbed her briefcase, gave Ian a hollow goodbye kiss, and walked out to her car. As she started the engine and pulled out of the driveway, a heavy sense of dread settled in her chest. During the drive to the business district, her mind raced. She thought about her marriage. Ian used to be a responsible guy, but after he lost his job, he had transformed into a lazy opportunist taking advantage of her success. Natalie's gut told her that Nancy's sweet smile was a massive red flag. Once at work, Natalie buried herself in financial reports and spreadsheets, trying to distract herself. Time flew by, and soon it was her lunch break. The office emptied out as her coworkers headed downstairs to grab food. Natalie opted to stay at her desk. She opened her packed lunch, trying to enjoy the quiet of her empty office. She had barely taken her first bite when her cell phone vibrated violently on the desk. The screen lit up with an alert from the security app she had installed the night before. Motion detected kitchen, dining room, and living room. Natalie's heart kicked into high gear, curiosity mixed with a knot of anxiety in her stomach. With trembling hands, she put her fork down. She unlocked her phone and tapped the notification, pulling up the live feed from the camera hidden in the wall clock. As soon as the high-definition video loaded, her eyes widened. Her elbow knocked her fork off the desk, sending it clattering to the floor, echoing in the quiet office. What she saw on her screen made her blood run cold, entirely shattering whatever tiny fraction of hope she had left for her marriage. The live feed, complete with crystal-clear audio, showed exactly what happened just minutes after she drove away that morning. The sweet masks Nancy, Ian, Riley, and Rick had worn instantly melted away. Nancy, who had just praised the beef stew, stood up with a look of pure disgust. The older woman picked up the massive, nearly full bowl of the gourmet stew, walked straight to the sink, and without a second of hesitation, dumped the entire thing down the InSinkErator garbage disposal. She literally flushed Natalie's hard work and expensive groceries down the drain like it was toxic waste. After destroying the food, Nancy burst into loud, mocking laughter with Riley and Rick. Riley pulled out the stack of $100 bills Natalie had been forced to give them the night before. She handed it to Rick and told him to order a massive spread of expensive sushi on DoorDash. They threw away her homemade meal just so they could feast on expensive takeout using her own money. Natalie's chest physically ached. She couldn't believe her in-laws could be this profoundly cruel. But the pain of watching her food being thrown away was nothing compared to what happened next. Shortly after their luxury sushi delivery arrived, and they began stuffing their faces, there was a knock on the front door. The living room camera caught Ian practically sprinting to open it. He swung the door wide, but he didn't walk back in alone. Ian was holding hands with a young, heavily pregnant woman. The woman strutted into the house like she owned the place, looking around the living room with an entitled smirk. Nancy dropped her sushi roll and rushed over to greet the pregnant woman. The mother-in-law's face lit up with absolute, genuine joy, a smile vastly different from the fake one she had given Natalie that morning. "There's my favorite daughter-in-law. Come in, sweetie," Nancy shrieked happily. She hugged the pregnant woman tightly, rubbing her swollen belly with deep affection. Tears spilled down Natalie's cheeks, dropping onto her phone screen. She held her breath, turning the volume up to hear every word. The pregnant woman's name was Vanessa. She walked over to Natalie's expensive sectional sofa and sank into it, complaining about how tired she was of sneaking around. She whined to Ian, asking when she could permanently move into this luxury house without having to hide from its actual owner. Ian sat down next to Vanessa, gently stroking her hair with a tenderness that made Natalie want to vomit. "Just be patient, baby. By this weekend, the deed to this house will be fully transferred into my name. Once that's done, we're going to kick that barren bitch out on the street, and we can finally live in peace," Ian cooed, his voice smooth and reassuring. Barren bitch. The word slipped out of the mouth of the man who lived entirely off her paycheck. Natalie slapped a hand over her mouth to muffle her own sobs so no one in the hallway would hear her. Her heart was pulverized. The accusation of being barren was incredibly cruel, especially since Ian was the one who had refused to sleep with her for months, making up endless excuses. Now she knew the truth. He wasn't touching her because he had been busy getting his mistress pregnant. The depravity of the family was on full display on the screen. Ian got up, walked down the hall to the master bedroom he shared with Natalie, and came back holding a thick manila envelope. Natalie recognized it instantly. It was the folder where she kept her most vital legal documents, locked inside her vanity drawer. Ian must have picked the lock. Ian opened the envelope and pulled out a heavy piece of paper. He paraded it in front of Vanessa, Nancy, and his siblings. It was the original deed to Natalie's house. They all cheered as if they had just won the lottery. Ian proudly explained that he had a buddy who was a shady notary public who could forge Natalie's signature. He was planning to execute a fake quitclaim deed, legally transferring the ownership of the $1 million property entirely into his name without Natalie ever knowing. Sitting in her office, Natalie slowly set her phone down on her desk. Her hands were shaking violently. But it wasn't from sorrow anymore. It was from a volcanic, white-hot rage that shot straight to her core. The truth burned away her tears in an instant, replaced by a steely, unyielding glare. Her love for Ian died and was buried right then and there. Her patience as a dutiful wife was completely gone. She was dealing with a pack of greedy thieves masquerading as a family. She took a deep breath, forcing her heart rate to slow down. She fixed her blazer and wiped the remaining moisture from her cheeks. There was no point crying over human garbage like Ian. She had to act fast before he actually weaponized her real estate documents against her. She wasn't going to let them take a single dime of her hard-earned wealth. A meticulous plan for vengeance began taking shape in her mind. If they wanted to play dirty, Natalie was going to give them a front-row seat to the most devastating destruction they could imagine, and she would make sure they would never, ever recover. Natalie sat in the eerie silence of her office, her brain operating like a supercomputer. She wasn't shedding a single tear. The fire in her chest had evaporated all of them. She knew she couldn't confront this pack of wolves with just anger. She needed an airtight strategy to annihilate them, without leaving a single loophole for them to strike back. She took a deep breath, centered herself, and mapped out her retaliations step by step. She would let Ian and his family feel victorious, just for a little while. Her first move was to call an old college friend who was now a highly successful real estate and civil litigation attorney. She scheduled a discreet meeting at a coffee shop far from her office or home. There, she laid out the entire situation, the sabotage, the mistress, and the plot to forge a quitclaim deed to steal her home. She showed him the video recordings directly from her security app. The lawyer was astounded, but quickly went into bulldog mode, giving her razor-sharp legal advice. He explicitly told her to play it cool, act completely normal at home, and not arouse an ounce of suspicion. After the meeting, Natalie drove straight to her bank. She accessed her safe deposit box, the one Ian didn't know existed, and retrieved the original, legally binding deed to her house, swapping it with the one from her vanity. She then went to a specialized print shop and had a high-quality replica of a standard title transfer document made. It looked incredibly official, complete with heavy stock paper and faux legal formatting, but it held absolutely zero legal weight. She securely locked the real deed back in the bank vault. While she was at the bank, she also moved 95% of her cash savings into a brand new, independent account that wasn't linked to any of the debit or credit cards Ian had access to. On her way home, Natalie stopped at a novelty spy shop downtown. She bought her ultimate weapon, a high-end disappearing ink pen. The ink looked perfectly normal when writing, but it was chemically designed to evaporate and vanish completely within 24 hours, leaving no trace behind. With the pen tucked safely in her designer purse, Natalie drove home. She wore the calmest, most serene expression she had ever managed. She was going to play the role of the oblivious, obedient wife flawlessly. When she walked through the front door, the house was suspiciously spotless. Nancy greeted her warmly, even offering to take her coat. Rick and Riley were sitting quietly in the living room, not causing a scene. Natalie played her part to perfection. She had even stopped at a gourmet bakery and brought home a dozen artisanal cupcakes as a peace offering. They all sat around the kitchen island eating dessert, the picture of a happy family. Inside, Natalie felt like she was dining with a pack of hyenas, waiting to tear her throat out. After dinner, Ian asked Natalie to come into the bedroom. He put on his best serious and caring husband face. He pulled a stack of papers from the familiar manila envelope, the fake transfer documents he had drawn up. Ian held her hands, looking deeply into her eyes, executing his manipulative script perfectly. "Natalie, honey, I met up with an old buddy today who's huge in real estate investment. He offered us a spot in a massive commercial LLC that will secure our future. The returns will pay for our future kids' college and take care of my mom and siblings so they never have to rely on your salary again." Natalie looked at the papers. She knew damn well this was a property transfer document disguised in legal jargon to confuse her. "Real estate investment, Ian? Is this safe?" "You know how hard I've worked to save our money," Natalie replied, injecting the perfect amount of hesitant anxiety into her voice. Ian squeezed her hands reassuringly. "It's 100% safe, babe. It's an asset protection program. I just need your signature on a few of these forms to authorize the initial buy-in. It's for us. I don't want you to have to work yourself to the bone forever." Natalie pretended to think it over. Then, she reached into her purse and pulled out the special pen. "Okay, Ian. If you really think this is for our future, I'll sign it. I trust you as my husband." With a steady hand, Natalie signed her name on the dotted lines of every single page Ian handed her. She slightly altered the loop of her signature, though to an untrained eye, it looked perfectly legitimate. Once she dotted the last I, Ian practically snatched the papers from the table, his eyes gleaming with unhinged greed. He pulled Natalie into a tight hug. To her, it felt like being coiled by a venomous snake. He swallowed the bait hook, line, and sinker. Ian had no idea that in less than 24 hours, the signature he thought was his golden ticket to becoming a millionaire would literally vanish into thin air, leaving him clutching worthless blank paper. The next morning, the vibe in the house was electric. Ian, Nancy, and the siblings were practically glowing with victory. They gathered around the breakfast table laughing louder than usual. Nancy didn't complain about the food once. Instead, she showered Natalie with exaggerated compliments. Natalie just sipped her coffee, watching them. She knew that in their heads, they were already the legal owners of her multi-million-dollar property. Ian was practically vibrating with excitement, constantly glancing at his briefcase holding the signed documents. He was planning to meet his shady notary friend that afternoon to officially file the paperwork. He was feeling so cocky and in control that his mask began to slip, and his arrogant, demanding tone returned. "Oh, by the way, Natalie," Ian said, puffing his chest out. "Didn't your boss mention a weekend corporate retreat or site visit out in Portland this week? You should really go. You've been cooped up here too long. You need a change of scenery. I'll take care of my mom and the kids here." Natalie smiled internally. She knew exactly what he was doing. He was trying to get her out of the house for the weekend so he could move his pregnant mistress in and celebrate. "Actually, Ian, you're right. There is a regional audit happening over the next 3 days. I was going to skip it to stay here with you guys, but if you insist, I can pack a bag and head to the airport this afternoon." "Yes, that's perfect. Don't worry about us. Go focus on your career. We want you to crush this audit," Nancy chimed in, her voice dripping with fake support that made Natalie want to roll her eyes. That afternoon, Natalie packed a large rolling suitcase, but alongside her business clothes, she packed a pair of compact binoculars, a portable digital voice recorder, and multiple external battery packs for her phone. Before stepping out the door, she double-checked that all her hidden cameras were online and recording to the cloud. Ian walked her out to her Audi, looking incredibly relieved. He waved enthusiastically as she backed out of the driveway and drove down the street. Natalie watched him in her rearview mirror until he went back inside. But Natalie didn't go to the airport. Once she was out of the subdivision, she pulled over, booked a room on her phone, and drove to a mid-range hotel located on the commercial strip directly across from the entrance to her gated neighborhood. She specifically requested a top-floor room with a balcony that had a direct line of sight down her street. From her balcony, she had a perfect view of her own driveway. After dropping her bags, She immediately pulled up the camera app on her phone. Ian was literally dancing in the living room with Nancy and his siblings. They were celebrating their successful con. "We did it! The house is mine!" Ian's voice blared through the speaker on Natalie's phone. "Call Vanessa. Tell her to get over here. She's going to love her new house." It didn't take long. About 30 minutes later, an Uber pulled into Natalie's driveway. Vanessa, the pregnant mistress, stepped out carrying a massive weekender bag. She waltzed through the front door like a Hollywood starlet arriving at her mansion. They immediately threw a mini party inside. They ordered hundreds of dollars of catering, popping cheap champagne, and ruthlessly mocking Natalie for being so easy to fool. Standing on the hotel balcony, watching the feed on her phone, Natalie's blood boiled. But she stayed perfectly disciplined. She hit record on her screen capture app, documenting every single second of Ian's infidelity, Vanessa's trespassing, and their conspiracy to commit fraud. Natalie then made a few phone calls. She called the president of her homeowners association, who she was good friends with, and she contacted a local police precinct commander her lawyer had briefed earlier that day. She reported that unauthorized individuals had occupied her home while she was out of town, and she suspected a major fraud scheme was taking place. That night, sitting in the dark hotel room, Natalie stared at the glowing lights of her own house down the street. She felt like a general observing a battlefield. The trap was set, the evidence was secured, and the authorities were on standby. She was going to let them enjoy one final night of absolute luxury under her roof, because tomorrow, she was bringing down a hurricane of justice that would wipe them off the map. Natalie closed her eyes and took a deep breath, ready to finally fumigate her castle and rid herself of these disgusting pests. Saturday evening arrived with a cool, crisp breeze, but the atmosphere in Natalie's front yard was loud and obnoxious. Standing on her hotel balcony across the main road, Natalie watched the circus unfolding on her property. The manicured front lawn, usually quiet and pristine, was clouded with thick smoke smelling of expensive BBQ. Ian and his family were throwing a massive, unapologetic party to celebrate winning Natalie's estate. Laughter echoed down the cul-de-sac, a symphony of greed that only solidified the ice in Natalie's veins. Ian had dragged Natalie's expensive Weber grill out of the garage. He was flipping thick, prime-cut ribeyes, puffing out his chest like a self-made millionaire hosting a VIP event. Sitting on Natalie's premium teak patio furniture was Vanessa. The pregnant mistress lounged back like a queen, constantly rubbing her belly and snapping her fingers at Riley and Rick to fetch her more sparkling cider or chips. She was completely acting the part of the new lady of the house. Nancy was buzzing around like a bee, carrying platters of food from the kitchen to the patio. She couldn't stop grinning at Vanessa. She kept feeding her pieces of steak, showering her with the warmth and affection she had aggressively denied Natalie. The sight was nauseating. Natalie remembered how Nancy had constantly berated her cooking, demanded cash, and treated her like dirt just because she hadn't gotten pregnant. Now, the sheer hypocrisy was playing out in high definition right in front of her. Natalie gripped the metal railing of the balcony, her knuckles white. She pulled out her phone, verifying that the cameras were still rolling and saving everything to the cloud. The time had come. She checked the clock. 8:00 p.m. It was the perfect moment to pull the plug on this sickening charade. Natalie turned away from the balcony, grabbed her designer purse, and checked her reflection in the mirror. She looked flawless. She walked out of the hotel room with the calm, terrifying confidence of an apex predator. When she reached the lobby of the hotel, her strike team was waiting. Her attorney stood there in a sharp navy suit. Beside him was the HOA president, looking incredibly confused and concerned by what Natalie had told him. And standing by the doors were 3 uniformed local police officers, hands resting on their utility belts. Natalie shook each of their hands professionally, thanking them for coming to assist her in securing her property and dealing with a domestic fraud issue. After a brief rundown of the situation and showing the police the live feed of the strangers on her patio, Natalie led the group across the street and down the block toward her house. Their footsteps were steady and deliberate, cutting through the quiet suburban night. As they approached her property line, the sound of Ian bragging loudly and the clinking of glasses became crystal clear. Natalie could hear Vanessa loudly talking about hiring contractors to rip out Natalie's rose garden to put in a koi pond. The group stopped at the edge of the driveway. The police officers took the lead, their presence projecting absolute, undeniable authority. Natalie took a deep breath, let it out slowly, and marched straight up the driveway. She walked right into the glow of the patio lights. The booming laughter died instantly. The smoke from the grill kept billowing, but the atmosphere flash froze. Ian, holding a pair of stainless steel tongs, turned around and turned to stone. His eyes bulged out of his head. The piece of ribeye he was holding slipped from the tongs and fell directly into the hot coals with a loud, aggressive hiss. Vanessa, who had been lounging like royalty, bolted upright, all the color draining from her face. Nancy, Riley, and Rick stood frozen like deer in the headlights, unable to comprehend what they were seeing. Natalie stepped fully onto her patio, flanked by her lawyer, the HOA president, and 3 armed police officers. She looked at every single person who had betrayed her. Her eyes were devoid of any warmth, any submission, any mercy. The woman standing before them was the rightful owner of the estate. Coming to collect a massive debt, she stopped right in front of the smoking grill, crossed her arms, and stared dead into Ian's terrified eyes. "Party's over. Freeloaders," Natalie said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it was dangerously low, cold, and lethal. It was the sound of a woman who had completely excised them from her heart. Ian opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He swallowed hard, his eyes darting to the police officers standing imposing behind his wife. The reality that his master plan had just blown up in his face hit him like a freight train. He had no idea how she found out, or why she was here instead of in Portland. The silence on the patio was deafening, broken only by the sizzling of the dropped steak. But Nancy, whose arrogance always blinded her reality, snapped out of her shock. She puffed up her chest, her face turning red with indignation, defaulting to her usual tactic of bullying. "How dare you bring strangers onto our property, Natalie?" Nancy screeched, pointing a finger at her. "What do you mean party's over? Have you lost your mind? This house belongs to my son." Ian handled the paperwork. "You have no right to step foot on this lawn, let alone bring the cops to harass us." Natalie didn't flinch. She didn't even break eye contact with Ian. She looked at her mother-in-law with a mixture of pity and sheer disgust. Her attorney stepped forward, opening his leather briefcase and pulling out an iPad. He looked at Nancy with the smug, polite smile of a lawyer who knows he's about to destroy someone's life. "Excuse me, ma'am, but you and your son seem to be suffering from severe delusions," the lawyer said in a crisp, authoritative tone. "I am legal counsel for Miss Natalie, the sole rightful owner of this property. And regarding this paperwork you mentioned, I think you need to take a closer look at it yourself." Driven by panic and a desperate need to prove he had won, Ian sprinted into the house. He came running back out holding the familiar manila envelope. He pulled out the stack of papers he believed Natalie had signed the night before. His hands shaking violently, he shoved the papers toward the police officers, the HOA president, and the lawyer. "Here's the proof. She signed the quitclaim and the transfer documents last night. Her signature is right at the bottom. This house is mine," Ian yelled, his voice cracking with desperation. The lawyer calmly took the papers, glanced at them, and turned them around to face Ian, Nancy, and Vanessa. "Take a look for yourself, Ian. Do you see a signature?" Ian, Nancy, and Vanessa practically shoved their faces into the document. Ian's eyes widened to the size of saucers. His jaw dropped. The signature line was completely, utterly blank. There was not a single drop of ink on the paper. The disappearing ink Natalie had used had evaporated flawlessly, leaving behind nothing but a worthless stack of printer paper. That's impossible. I watched her sign it last night. This is a trick. She used some kind of voodoo on this paper." Nancy screamed hysterically, grabbing the document and frantically rubbing the blank line with her thumb, praying the ink would magically reappear. "There's no magic here, ma'am. Just the staggering stupidity of your son trying to defraud my client," the lawyer said firmly. "The original, legally binding deed to this estate is locked in a bank vault under my client's name. And that is not the only surprise we have for you tonight." The lawyer tapped the screen of his iPad and turned the volume all the way up. He played the highlight reel Natalie had edited together. It started with Nancy dumping the homemade stew down the garbage disposal. It cut to them ordering expensive sushi with Natalie's cash. Then, it showed Ian bringing Vanessa in, calling Natalie a barren bitch. And finally, Ian detailing his exact plan to forge documents to steal the house. The audio echoed across the patio, trapping Ian and his family in their own undeniable guilt. Vanessa, watching the video, suddenly realized the horrific truth. The man who got her pregnant wasn't a rich tech investor. He was a broke, unemployed loser who lived off his wife. He didn't own the mansion. He was a parasite. Vanessa's face turned bright red with humiliation and rage. She glared at Ian with absolute hatred. The lead police officer stepped forward, resting a hand on his belt, instantly killing the tension. "Ian," the officer said, his voice hard, "we have received an official complaint from the homeowner, backed by substantial video and documentary evidence. You are currently looking at potential charges for attempted real estate fraud, forgery, and domestic theft. As the legal owner of this property, Miss Natalie has the right to trespass you and your uninvited guests immediately." Ian's knees buckled. He collapsed onto the grass. His entire facade of power crumbled into dust. He looked up at Natalie with pathetic, pleading eyes, desperately searching for the loving woman he had manipulated for years. But Natalie's face was carved from ice. "I want all of you off my property tonight," Natalie commanded, her voice ringing out like a judge handing down a sentence. "The officers are going to give you exactly 5 minutes. Listen to me carefully. You have 5 minutes to leave. You are not allowed to take any valuables. No jewelry, no electronics, and no cash. You leave with the clothes on your backs and the cheap luggage you arrived with. If you refuse, or if you try to fight this, I promise you will all be sleeping in a holding cell tonight." The ultimatum struck the family like lightning. The 5-minute clock started, and sheer, unadulterated panic erupted on the patio. The punishment for the parasites had begun, and Natalie was going to ensure they felt every single second of it. Those 5 minutes felt like they were moving at warp speed for Ian and his family. The panic that exploded on the patio was chaotic. Ian, who had just been on his knees, scrambled to his feet, his face pale as a ghost. He ran in circles, completely clueless as to what to do, his brain short-circuiting. The arrogance he had nurtured for months was obliterated in an instant. He stared at the lead police officer, who was literally tapping the face of his watch, counting down the seconds with zero sympathy. Ian tried to lunge forward to grab Natalie's hands and beg, but the broad chest of a patrol officer immediately blocked his path. The freeloading husband could only wail, realizing he was actually getting booted from the mansion he had claimed as his own. In the corner, Nancy was acting like a cornered animal. Refusing to accept the bitter reality slapping her in the face, she tried to sprint into the house to grab her designer handbag, which contained stolen jewelry and the cash she had extorted from Natalie. But before her hand even touched the door handle, a female officer and the HOA president blocked her path. Nancy thrashed, screamed, and cursed at everyone in sight. She begged to at least grab a change of clothes and her prescription meds. But Natalie's rules were absolute. Nothing of value leaves the house, only the clothes on their backs. Riley and Rick, who had been frozen in terror, finally broke down into hysterical sobbing. Riley, used to being pampered and getting whatever she demanded, threw a massive tantrum. She collapsed, crying by her mother's legs, refusing to move. Rick, the tough gamer, looked like a lost toddler. He stared longingly through the sliding glass door at his expensive dual-monitor gaming setup in the living room, realizing he would never touch it again. They both screamed Ian's name, begging their older brother to fix this, to save them from ruin. But their successful brother was just standing on the grass, shaking and crying. "Time's up," the lead officer barked. There was no leniency. With firm, measured force, the police began physically ushering Ian, Nancy, Riley, Rick, and Vanessa down the driveway toward the street. Their protests and resisting were completely useless. Nancy, who wouldn't stop thrashing, was practically dragged by the arms by 2 officers. One of her expensive heels slipped off, leaving her looking unhinged and disheveled. Ian was shoved hard, stumbling and falling onto the asphalt at the end of the driveway. Natalie stood silently on her porch, watching the eviction with eyes as cold as a winter storm. Her heart didn't break even a fraction of an inch at the sight of her husband and mother-in-law's crocodile tears. Once the entire parasitic family was pushed past the property line, the heavy wrought iron driveway gates slowly swung shut with a loud, final clang. The electronic lock engaged, physically severing the 2 worlds. Inside the gates stood Natalie, a victor who had reclaimed her kingdom. Outside the gates, Ian and his family were sprawled on the cold asphalt, officially homeless, possessing nothing but staggering humiliation. Neighbors, woken up by the screaming, were standing on their porches or looking through their blinds. They offered zero sympathy. Ian's family's trashy behavior was a well-known nuisance in the upscale cul-de-sac. Amidst the sobbing and despair on the street, Vanessa, who had been seething in silence, finally erupted. The pregnant woman pushed herself up from the curb, her face flushed with volcanic anger. She stormed over to Ian, who was still sitting on the ground. Without a single word of warning, Vanessa pulled her arm back and delivered a vicious, ringing slap directly across Ian's face. The smack echoed down the quiet street, shocking Nancy, Riley, and Rick into silence. Ian clutched his burning cheek, looking up at his mistress in utter shock. "You lying, pathetic, useless piece of trash," Vanessa screamed, her voice vibrating with hatred. "You told me you were a wealthy tech investor. You said this mansion was yours and your wife was just a crazy squatter. You're nothing but a broke parasite. How dare you con me and promise me a luxury lifestyle when you're sleeping on the literal street tonight?" Ian reached out, trying to grab Vanessa's wrist, his voice cracking. "Vanessa, babe, please, listen to me. This is a misunderstanding. I can fix this. I'll get a job. I'll provide for you and the baby. I swear. Just don't leave me." Vanessa violently yanked her hand away, looking at him like he was a pile of garbage. "Provide for me with what? A McDonald's paycheck? Don't ever try to contact me again. My baby isn't going to have a fraud and a homeless loser for a father. Lose my number." Vanessa turned on her heel and marched down the sidewalk into the dark, leaving Ian face first on the asphalt, sobbing and screaming her name, losing his house, his pride, his money, and his mistress, all in the span of 30 minutes, completely broke whatever was left of his sanity. That night was the longest, most agonizing night of their lives. Without a single dollar to rent a motel room, the family was forced to huddle together on a bus stop bench down the main road. The chilly night wind cut through the designer clothes they wore. Nancy cursed Natalie's name to the heavens, while Riley and Rick complained endlessly about being freezing and hungry. Ian just sat on the concrete, hugging his knees in catatonic silence. The next morning, as the sun rose and their stomachs violently grumbled, Ian had a flash of hope. He remembered he still had his debit card in his wallet. Mustering whatever energy they had left, Ian led his mother and siblings on a long, exhausting walk to a 7-Eleven gas station that had an ATM. Nancy's eyes lit up. They imagined withdrawing hundreds of dollars, getting a hot breakfast at a diner, and booking a hotel. Ian slid his card into the machine with shaking hands. He punched in his PIN and selected a $500 withdrawal, praying there was still money from Natalie's last deposit. The screen flashed a message that made Ian's heart stop. Transaction declined. Account closed. Ian frantically checked the balance. Available balance, $0. He tried his backup credit card. The ATM immediately swallowed it. Card retained. Reported stolen, frozen. Natalie had stayed 10 steps ahead. She had severed all joint accounts, drained the funds to her private bank, and reported all his secondary cards as lost or stolen. The last microscopic shred of hope shattered into dust. They looked at each other with hollow, dead eyes. No money, no house, no food. They were truly stranded on the streets, about to learn how brutal the real world was when you couldn't leech off someone else. 6 months had passed since the night the storm cleared, and the parasites were excised from Natalie's life. Time healed her wounds and brought massive, positive changes. Without the emotional and financial vampires draining her energy, Natalie's career skyrocketed. She secured a massive promotion as a VP at her firm. Her salary tripled, and her face radiated a stunning, peaceful confidence. She dressed in sharp, tailored designer suits. She had buried the trauma of her toxic marriage deep in the past and focused entirely on building a brilliant future for herself. Her home had been totally redecorated, erasing any lingering trace of the people who tried to steal it. One sweltering Tuesday afternoon, the summer sun beat down on the downtown pavement, creating heat waves over the asphalt. Natalie had just wrapped up a highly successful meeting with major corporate clients. To celebrate closing the deal, she had taken them to an elite, reservations-only steakhouse in the heart of the city's luxury shopping district. Natalie enjoyed every bite of her meal in total peace. She laughed, networked, and discussed international expansion. There was no anxiety about maxed-out credit cards or dealing with a gaslighting husband. After the lavish lunch concluded, Natalie said her goodbyes to her clients. She walked out the heavy glass doors of the restaurant, exuding absolute power and grace. The valet rushed to hold the door for her, nodding respectfully. The wall of humid city heat hit her face, a sharp contrast to the AC inside. She stood under the restaurant's awning, checking her phone as she waited for her private black car service to pull around the block. While she waited, her sharp eyes casually scanned the busy street corner opposite the steakhouse. Suddenly, her gaze locked onto a scene that made her stop breathing for a fraction of a second. Under the brutal, unforgiving sun, a scene of incredible poetic irony was playing out. Sitting on a filthy piece of cardboard near a subway grate was an older woman in tattered, oversized clothes. She was holding out a crumpled paper cup to passing businessmen, begging for loose change. Her skin, which used to be pampered by Natalie's stolen La Mer creams, was now leathery, sun-damaged, and covered in city grime. A few feet away, a young man and woman were busking. The girl was shaking a makeshift tambourine made of bottle caps, and the boy was playing a beat-up acoustic guitar terribly, singing off-key while motioning to an open guitar case with a few dollar bills in it. They looked exhausted, emaciated, and entirely stripped of their former arrogance. But the most striking figure was a dangerously skinny man digging frantically through a city trash can. He was wearing a filthy, stained dress shirt that had long lost its original color. He was pulling out crushed aluminum cans and tossing them into a heavy garbage bag slung over his hunched shoulder. He moved like an old, broken man. It was Ian, the man who used to demand prime rib and command her to max out her credit cards. The buskers were Riley and Rick, who used to demand designer clothes and high-speed gaming internet. And the beggar was Nancy, the woman who thought she was entitled to the wealth of an empire. Karma had executed its judgment flawlessly. The universe had balanced the scales, delivering a punishment perfectly tailored to their extreme greed. Natalie stared at them from across the street without blinking. There wasn't a single drop of pity in her heart. All she felt was a profound, indescribable sense of closure. Justice didn't always have to be fought for with fists. Sometimes, you just had to step back and watch gravity pull the trash down to the bottom of the canyon. Right at that moment, Ian, shifting his heavy bag of cans, happened to glance across the street. His eyes locked onto the stunning, powerful woman standing under the awning of the luxury steakhouse. Ian's eyes went wide. He rubbed his filthy face with his sleeve, unable to believe what he was seeing. He immediately recognized his ex-wife. He saw how she was glowing, dressed in high-end fashion, waiting for a chauffeured car. The crushing weight of 6 months of regret, starvation, and homelessness exploded inside his chest. Dropping his bag of cans right on the sidewalk, Ian sprinted across the busy street, dodging taxis and blaring horns, limping heavily. Nancy, Riley, and Rick noticed him running, followed his gaze, and saw Natalie. They started shouting Ian's name, but he ignored them, charging toward the woman whose life he had ruined. Ian blew past the valet who tried to stop him and literally threw himself onto the concrete at Natalie's feet. The man who once thought he was a king was now groveling on the hot pavement. Tears carved clean lines through the dirt on his face. He pressed his hands together, sobbing hysterically like a terrified child. His voice was raspy and broken. "Natalie! Nat, please, help me! Forgive me, I'm begging you!" Ian wailed, looking up at her. "Have mercy on me. Look at us, we're starving. We're sleeping in alleys. I am so sorry I threw you away. Please give me one more chance. Let me be your husband again. I'll be your servant. I'll clean the floors. I'll do anything. Please save us from this hell." He reached out a trembling, filthy hand, trying to touch the hem of Natalie's designer slacks. Natalie took one deliberate step back, avoiding his touch. Her expression did not change. Her eyes remained as cold as ice, sharp as a scalpel, and completely devoid of emotion. She looked down at the complete destruction of the man who had called her barren and tried to steal her home. She didn't say a single word. She didn't yell, she didn't lecture, and she didn't gloat. She kept her mouth shut, delivering a silence that was 1,000,000 times more agonizing than any insult she could have screamed at him. To her, speaking to the trash at her feet was a waste of breath and beneath her dignity. A sleek, black Cadillac Escalade pulled up smoothly to the curb right in front of her. The driver immediately jumped out and opened the rear door. Natalie turned her head away from Ian, stepping gracefully into the cool, leather-scented, air-conditioned cabin of the SUV. She didn't look back. The driver shut the heavy door with a solid, final thud. From the outside, Ian scrambled on his knees to the side of the Escalade. He banged his weak fists against the tinted glass, screaming Natalie's name, tears streaming down his face. Inside, Natalie stared straight ahead, smoothly and silently. The dark-tinted window rolled up, completely cutting off the sound of his cries, severing the absolute last thread of hope Ian had left in the world. The Escalade pulled smoothly into traffic, leaving Ian sobbing wildly in a cloud of exhaust, while his mother and siblings watched their only lifeline drive away forever. The debt was paid in full, sweet, merciless justice had been served, and there was no room left for parasites in Natalie's perfect new life.
I'm freezing. I'm bleeding. Slowly fading away. But don't worry, I'm fine. The cold has settled in my heartbeat, like winter living in my veins. Every breath feels numb and fragile. Every smile just hides the pain. I'm breaking quietly in silence, falling slow without a sound. Yet I keep saying I'm okay, while my world burns to the ground. I'm frozen here, I'm bleeding slowly, dying piece by piece inside. But I still whisper, it's alright, just to keep you from goodbye. I'm shattered, love, but don't you worry, I'll pretend till my last breath. Even while my soul is fading, I'll say everything's okay. Maybe pain just learned to live here. Maybe sorrow feels like home. So I wear my wounds like armor and survive them all alone. I'm frozen here, I'm bleeding slowly, dying piece by piece inside. But I still whisper, it's alright, just to keep you from goodbye. I'm shattered, love, but don't you worry, I'll pretend till my last breath. Even while my soul is fading, I'll say everything's okay. If you ever see me smiling, no, it's just my last defense. 'Cause sometimes love means hiding how much you're suffering. No, I'm frozen here, I'm bleeding slowly, dying piece by piece inside. But I still whisper, it's alright, just to keep you from goodbye. I'm shattered, love, but don't you worry, I'll pretend till my last breath. Even while my soul is fading, I'll say everything's okay. It's okay. Don't pity me. My heart doesn't need your mercy. I can still stand on my own. I was broken by your leaving, fell deeper than I thought I would. But pain has taught me how to heal now and survive what once I couldn't. You don't have to look back sadly, don't reach out with guilty hands. What you shattered made me stronger. Now I rise where I once collapsed. My heart doesn't need your pity, not another empty sign. I've got enough strength left within me to rebuild this life of mine. My feet are steady through the sorrow, I can stand through all the pain. You don't have to save me, darling. I'll learn to breathe again. I once begged for your affection. Now I've learned my worth in scars. And the man you left in pieces found his own way through the dark. My heart doesn't need your pity, not another empty sign. I've got enough strength left within me to rebuild this life of mine. My feet are steady through the sorrow. I can stand through all the pain. You don't have to save me, darling. I'll learn to breathe again. So keep your sympathy behind you. I don't need what's left undone. Sometimes losing who once broke you is how healing has begun. My heart doesn't need your pity, not another empty sign. I've got enough strength left within me to rebuild this life of mine. My feet are steady through the sorrow. I can stand through all the pain. You don't have to save me, darling. I'll rise alone again. I'll rise alone